Good morning, good morning, good morning. This morning we're talking about the open source history, which I actually know nothing, Jon Snow. So I'm doing this 6-part blog series, 6-ish blog part series on open source. And one of the things I wanted to look into was the history of open source. I'm fascinated by the history of projects, how they came to be, whatnot. I just came over from the OpenStack project, and it was started by NASA and Rackspace completely separately. They both decided they wanted to build up this cloud project. They both decided to use Python. They both decided to open source it. And shortly after, OpenStack was born to be an umbrella over that cloud project as it evolved and grew and became easier to use. So that's the OpenStack history. And then I have been involved in Linux, in specifically Red Hat Enterprise Linux, Fedora, CentOS, for several years. And the history of Linux was that Linus Torvald sent out an email about this little operating system he was working on. If anyone wanted to see it, let him know to give feedback. And Linux was born. Linus didn't actually name it, but he was going to name it something else. Actually, I should look this up. But someone who was helping him upload the data was like, no, call it Linux. And that's how Linux happened. So I'm today just doing some research, answering questions, open to hearing any kind of thoughts around history of projects. I'm particularly interested in the juicy tidbits, like, yes, you decided to make that project open source. Why? I mean, like, there's a lot of embracing of the open source development cycle. Especially recently, Microsoft joined the Linux Foundation a couple of years ago, bought GitHub, et cetera. But why? Like, that's the part that really interests me. I'm going to put together a series of questions for Jacob and Zach Smith, the founders of Equinix Metal, and be like, so why did we decide to make Tinkerbell open source? What was the thought behind that? What did we want to get out of that, besides open source being awesome and collaboration and whatnot? What were we thinking there? And that will definitely go into the blog. But for this morning, what I've done is just Googled history of open source, and what came up first was the Open Source Initiative, which, love it or hate it, was kind of the founders. I don't want to say founders, but definitely one of the first leading foundations within the open source movement, or maybe the most vocal, I should say, but development based on sharing and collaboration and improvement of software source code has a history essentially as long as software itself, because basically, but I would actually say that the history is as long as there's been some sort of sharing infrastructure. So email or disks to actually put software on and share those disks with other people, maybe outside of your company or outside of your group. And so that kind of limits us to when software got small enough to share. So that's when I would say, personally. But in the late 1990s, interest and participation in this phenomenon increased markedly with mainstream recognition of Linux and publications like Forbes and release of Netscape browser's source code, which was pretty awesome. Too bad Netscape went away, but pretty phenomenal. Then the other place that I'm going to look for open source is on let me see if I'm just Googling open source history. It's like, I just gave you that website, Leander. I want to show you what my process is like. There's the Wikipedia version, and I just want to, history of FOSS. And this goes back to the 50s and 60s. Oh, dang. So it's saying in the 50s and 60s, operating systems, software and compilers were delivered as part of the hardware automatically. So it wasn't a separate license. And the source code was human readable instead of binary machine code. Universities were early adopters, of course. Modifications between universities were openly shared, of course. So this is basically saying this comes up from university, which totally makes sense. There's a lot of sharing in academia. There's a lot of not sharing in academia, but there's a lot of sharing. So open source, according to this, came before proprietary. Sneaker. Huh. This is cool. Okay, so we're going to definitely keep this page. What else do we have here? So I should also write in the comments, cancel. Post your comments here. And then I'm a little bit surprised that I don't have a history of open source from opensource.com. And bam, here it is. I should not have finished that sentence. Okay. 6 pivotal moments in open source history. Okay. Richard Stallman. RMS. Okay, this is basically just reading. I'm not reading this for you. So cool. NDAs and proprietary software licenses became the norms, and the best programmers were hired from MIT, blah, blah, blah. And there were where they could no longer share or collaborate. Stallman resolved he would create a complete operating system which would not deprive users of the freedom to understand how it worked and would allow them to make go Stallman. Okay, so GNU, GPL, which is the one of the first. It was one of the first open source licenses, maybe the first open source license. Oh yeah, here we go. Every license would have it. Every piece of software would have its own license. And so GNU license, GPL, was written as encapsulated the values of copyleft. Oh, I love this. I love this article. Also, let's just make sure we get this right out here. And maybe this will go into, maybe this will be a definition of open source as well as the history of open source. But open source is more like free as in puppy, as in you're going to need to spend money to take care of that puppy. If you care about how it uses the bathroom and what tricks it can do, and whether or not you're its favorite or not. And unlike free as in beer or free as in love, there's a certain amount of responsibility and time that needs to be put into, and money that needs to be put into open source project. Yeah, so corporate investment in open source. It's this is written obviously before the Microsoft. Oh, and Dave Neary wrote this. Badass. I love Dave. Shout out to Dave Neary. What are the comments? Whoa. Oh. The source code should be. Open source is a sham. Only free software truly respects user rights. A little bit of a fight going on. Cygnus was the first company to offer commercial support for free software. Oh, this I am interested in. Renamed Cygnus Solution in 1997. It was purchased by Red Hat in 1999. Ah, that's good to know. And then I wonder if the Cathedral and the Bazaar. Musings on Linux and open source by an accidental revolutionary. I wonder if this is available on Amazon.no. Pre-sold. Very important. It's available. Buy-in. Wait. It's totally available. So is Stallman. Sam Williams. Oh. Okay. All right. Totally buying those 2 books. Okay. So yeah, that's where we are today, is working on the history. So since it's kind of quiet, and this is going to be more about reading and compiling, and I tell you what, next week I will talk about what I've found, what I've discovered. It might be similar to today. It might be more of an essay, but I'm looking forward to it. And if you're interested in contributing to this, Let me pull up the GitHub account, the GitHub website, the open source. Okay. Yeah, you can contribute there. So yeah, we're keeping it short today. Let me know if you have any questions. I am now just going to update the website with the history. I wonder if this works. I'm just adding the links that I found this morning. I'm going to see if they translate well. Here, so we've got the history, and I'm ordering these 2 books right quick. Oh, I'm excited. So I've got a lot of reading to do. Good times. Yes, yes. So yeah. Also, there's this sticker. I love this sticker. All right, so take care. And if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the GitHub repository, file as an issue. I will see you every Wednesday morning. I do a stream about open source, and every Saturday night, Central European time, I do a stream about escape rooms. So yeah. Take care, and I'll see you next Wednesday. Bye.